President Barack Obama entered a re-election campaign that saw the focus of the country placed squarely on a faltering economy. His Republican challenger had credentials and a background that was tailored to economic repair and stability. The unemployment rate in the country had been over 8% for 40 months during the president's first term, which was a first in American history. As Chris Litza noted in his article for the Washington Post nearly 3 months before the election, the president would have to become the first incumbent in over 70 years to secure re-election with an unemployment rate over 7.2%. As we know now, President Obama did succeed in making history, but how? Research suggests that President Barack Obama achieved re-election to a second term of office in 2012 because of growing Democratic-leaning voter blocs, perceived inconsistencies in Republican Party platforms, and public support of the president's bailout of several key automobile companies during his first term. Growing blocs of Democratic-leaning voters would turn out in historic numbers to support the president, in part due to Mitt Romney creating perceived shifts in ideology when we compare statements made during the campaign. Swing state voters would also turn out in crucial states such as Ohio and Wisconsin and would side with the president in his handling of the auto bailout and support him with their vote. Let's look first at voter turnout on a national scale. According to the Pew Research Center, Black, Hispanic, and Asian voters, a traditionally Democratic-leaning bloc, turn out in historic numbers to support President Obama, particularly in battleground states, while the New York Times notes that the white portion of voters continue to shrink. New York Times exit polling data provides sufficient evidence to support this point, and I've converted this information into a bar chart here to highlight the trend and growth of minority vote share in these elections. As New York Times polling illustrates, the percentage of minority vote share in these elections is steadily rising. Here we can see data pulled from presidential exit polls from 2000 through 2012, with three specific minority groups highlighted: Black, Hispanic, and Asian. These three minority groups each consistently voted for the Democratic candidate, and the white vote share noted here in parentheses consistently voted for the Republican candidate. However, the white vote share also consistently diminished in size. This also constituted in 2012 the majority of Mitt Romney's supporters. To provide some context, we see in 2008 the 74 to 2012 72%, 2% decrease here can be numerically stated as over 2.4 million votes, which in an election decided by just 3.5 million votes, we can see the overall impact that this shifting demographic has. The next point of my presentation will discuss some of the events and missteps that contributed to this historic turnout going for President Obama rather than Mitt Romney. Timothy Stanley of CNN noted Mitt Romney's inability to overcome some of the shifts in his ideology and inconsistencies, starting with the Republican primary process and leading into the general election. For example, Brett Logerato of Business Insider stated that Mitt Romney hardened into an immigration hawk during the divisive primary process, specifically referencing Mitt Romney's stance on the DREAM Act, which provided support for some immigrant groups to become, provided a pathway for certain immigrant groups to become citizens. His stance on this issue was unpopular with Hispanics, and as we can see, this Hispanic voter bloc turned out in historic numbers, and eventually to support the president. Jonathan Capehart of the Washington Post also noted how Mitt Romney shifted positions on several social issues as well that affected minority groups and women with abortion rights and gun control. As we discuss national issues and national numbers, let's focus now on a specific region of the country. Polling in key battleground states such as Michigan, Wisconsin, and Ohio cited overwhelming support for the president's bailout of automobile companies, which was consistently opposed by Mitt Romney. Politico's Catherine Wolfe and Jessica Meyer stated that the bailout may have actually saved Obama's campaign, noting his success in criticizing Mitt Romney's 2008 New York Times op-ed, which was titled "Let Detroit Go Bankrupt," which of course was not well received in that area of the country. Romney would attempt to counter that criticism from the Democrats and would eventually release an ad stating that the president's bailout had actually resulted in jobs, specifically from Jeep, being shipped overseas. Now, Sam Stein of the Huffington Post noted that his ad was also met with more criticism and was poorly received and did not deliver the positive impact he thought it would. Jeff Green and Mark Niket of Bloomberg Businessweek quoted Quinnipiac University Polling Institute as stating that Ohio would have gone for Romney if not for the bailout. President Barack Obama achieved re-election because of growing Democratic-leaning voter blocs, Republican Party inconsistencies, and national support of President Obama's auto bailout. These growing blocs of Democratic-leaning voter groups turned out in historic numbers to support the president, in part due to Governor Romney creating perceived shifts in ideology when compared to statements made during the Republican primary process. Swing state voters also would turn out to side with the president in supporting the auto bailout with their vote. President Obama then did become the first president in over 70 years to gain re-election with an unemployment rate over 7.2%. And this changing American demographic, this shifting American electorate, will now cause political strategists to rethink their individual approaches to winning elections for several years to come. What questions do you have?
Could you elaborate on Mr. Romney's specific social shifts?
Absolutely, thank you. Several of the social shifts affected groups that would vote overwhelmingly for President Obama, including women and minorities. For example, Mitt Romney had once stated that abortion should be safe and legal, but then he would later claim that he was in favor of overturning Roe v. Wade. Jonathan Capehart of the Washington Post also noted that some of the discrepancies affected his support from the Republican Party itself. As governor of Massachusetts, he signed off on an assault weapons ban and then tried to later say that he would not support any gun control legislation as president. What other questions do you have?
How was President Obama able to capitalize on the auto bailout?
Well, President Barack Obama succeeded not only in capitalizing on Mitt Romney's op-ed in 2008, but also on the American public's support of the auto bailout. According to Jeff Green and Martin Niket of Bloomberg Businessweek, 56% of the general public supported the president's bailout, and he made note of that support on frequent campaign stops. Vice President Joe Biden also invoked another area of popular support during these campaign stops when he would say that Osama bin Laden is dead and General Motors is alive. Thank you.